Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Black Tech Unplugged. I am joined today by another person across the pond, Andre Hitchman. Andre, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so a little background is Andre and I used to work at the same company, but obviously I was based in the States. Andre is based in the UK. But Andre, for my listeners who don't know anything about you and they'll know by the end of this episode, I do want to start off with a brief introduction of yourself. So why don't you go ahead and take that away?
My name is Andre. I work at Kin Carter as a software engineer, specializing in Android mobile app development. I've been with Kin Carter for about 6 years now, so I joined as a graduate and worked my way through there. Um, I'm based in the UK, in London, born and bred here. And outside of Kin Carter as well, I am a co-founder of an organization called Xuntos. Now, Xuntos was set up as soon as I left university, basically out of frustration between the mentoring opportunities and the support that people from underrepresented backgrounds in tech were not getting. So when I was in university, I didn't have any guidance or support on how to apply for graduate roles, what they were specifically looking for. When I left university, me and my co-founder founded Xuntos, and it's basically a space and a community for people to best equip themselves for a career in tech industry. And it's focused on people from underrepresented groups. That's my background. That's me.
Excellent. And we're going to dive more into Xuntos later in the episode. So I'm excited to learn more about that because it's a little bit of an issue everywhere, right? Where we get all the skills, but what do we do with it?
Exactly.
Okay, so Andre, I want to start the conversation and just go through your journey as a software engineer. So my first question is, how did you even know software engineering was a career that you could get into?
I didn't. So when I was in school, we used to call it ICT, so Information Communication Technology. And back then, it's not too long ago, actually. Back then, ICT was mostly, do you know how to use Microsoft Excel or PowerPoint? Very basic kind of computer stuff. But I was always more curious and more interested in what goes on behind the scenes. So from an early age, for me, I was always keen on the tech. So I was a gamer, but I would also try to tinker with any tech we had in the house. So when my mum got a computer for me when we were younger, I wanted to set up Wi-Fi. So I learned about how to set that up, and I learned about, setting up your own network, trying to set up wireless printing. I even got so curious, I ventured out. I wanted to build my own PC from scratch. So we went to a computer fair here in the UK and bought all the parts. My stepdad took me, bought all the parts, the RAM, the motherboards, learned all about that. And it just kept sparking my interest to the point where one time during the summer holidays, I didn't have any activities planned or anything, but I wanted to, just pique my interest. And I found an activity for my age group that was teaching people how to build computers. It was about a 2-3 day course. I signed up and I went. I learned how to build computers. And there was an instructor there, and he mentioned to me some course called computing at university. So I was beginning to finish my high school and look into what I wanted to do next. And university was one of the next avenues didn't know what to do. I thought I should do ICT. But yeah, he mentioned computing or computer science. And I didn't have a clue what that meant at the time. Even when I applied and got into the course, I still didn't really know what it meant. But it was one of the best decisions I did. I'm so grateful to that instructor for recommending it to me, because I never looked back ever since. So from their recommendation, I did a degree in computer science, and learned about like programming specifically. But funny enough, at the end of my degree, I actually didn't want to be a programmer. I wanted to be a UI UX designer.
Oh my gosh.
Something completely different.
Completely different. I mean, it's not the exact same thing.
Definitely not. And what ended up happening is I was applying for graduate roles. I wasn't getting like any callbacks or anything. So I felt very disheartened. And I just thought, maybe this is not for me. And at the time, I loved like thinking about the journey of a user on applications. And I liked designing in my own time. I wasn't very great, but it was something I think I was keen to pursue. So I started applying for graduate roles in UI UX. I didn't get any callbacks for that. But it wasn't until one of the roles I did apply for, someone actually came back to me. It's my first one, I think my first and only one. They got back to me and said, "Hey, we want to invite you to an assessment center. I think you're really great." And I was honest to them. I told them, I don't think this is a role for me. I don't feel confident. I don't want to do this. And they really spent the time to like persuade me. You're actually great. You got this. You can do this. And I think you would be great at this software engineering graduate role. And to be honest, that one conversation changed my mind for the rest of my career. Like from that stage, I applied for more software engineering roles, and I believed in myself again that this is something that I want to do. I didn't end up getting that role because at the very last moment when they were offering positions, they retracted them all. That can happen sometimes. So, but that was fine. I ended up applying for other roles, and I ended up landing at KNC. So it was I guess it was yeah, my fate to end up in KSC. But it was a great stepping stone.
Yes, let's unpack some of that there, because you experienced a lot on just that little bit of your journey. And so I want to make sure that the listeners actually fully understand everything that you went through. So let's start off with I believe you called it a computer fair, right? That's where you went and your stepfather took you and you started learning all the different types of activities that you can do in tech. We'll put it that way. First off, because on stateside, I don't think that we have anything called a computer fair. So let's start off by defining like what a computer fair is exactly.
Yeah, the easiest way I can describe it is just think of like a market, like a food market. So there's loads of traders with their stands, and they are selling different computer parts. So I guess like a trade fair. And yeah, you go around the trade fair, meet all the different traders and buy your different parts for them. Now, what difference does that make to go into a store? The trade fair or the computer fair is different, more cheaper prices because they're at trade prices. So yeah, that's what a computer fair is.
And okay, so that's helpful. So it's almost like thinking of it as a little bit of a career day because there's different, as you say, trades. It's really different careers or different, technology perspectives probably at each of the stands or areas. So it's like you get to go and have these conversations and really learn what's going on from a tech perspective.
Yeah, like for example, I remember going around and there was one person who was selling motherboard, and then another person who was actually selling like the like chips, like CPU, or another person selling hard drives. And they were going around asking me, like, what's your spec? Like, how much RAM do you want? What do you want to actually do? Are you going to be gaming? Or are you just programming? And like, I didn't know these these things at the time, so I was going around like trying to learn and understand. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, building a computer.
Yes, yes. Okay, so that's interesting and a little bit different. I haven't heard anyone actually on the podcast have that experience. But even going a step further, as you continue to progress and go to school and graduate school, like you mentioned, to study computer science slash engineering, not really computer science, but programming. And a common theme that I was hearing within your story is other people giving you advice to kind of get you onto the right path. And I want to touch on that because as individuals who are Black and in tech, I feel like obviously we never saw our parents doing this role, right? Like our parents are not software engineers, our parents are not project managers. And just want to touch on that theme of providing advice and tips for getting into tech. And do you feel like that has been a theme throughout your entire career? I know for me, that definitely has, because even from the perspective of, understanding what an internship is or learning that there's different areas in tech, it always came from an external source that like gave me some tips or advice. And I actually followed the tips or advice, which is also a key part of this process.
Yeah, I would say so. Like one common thing I realized at university is like my group of friends who I hang out with, like they were applying for similar roles, and
Okay.
they were getting callbacks and offers, and we got around the same grades, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, and I was confused, like how come you're getting so these are friends that don't look like me, so they're not Black, so
Yeah.
I was like, why, how come you're getting roles, but I'm not? And they were baffled as well. Like they didn't get it. And I don't, to be honest, I don't know the specific of why it was happening, but at least from my side, I really did feel like I just don't know how to navigate my connections properly.
Mm-hmm.
Or I didn't have enough connections. And specific advice. It's only when I was going through the process and getting rejected so many times, I was researching, or the people who I was speaking to, recruiters, etc., were
Yeah.
suggesting these kind of things. And I just felt, I shouldn't have had to get so many rejections to, finally realize how to get a job. I felt that beforehand, or I should have got equipped. And my uni did give like CV advice, but they didn't really give, some other advice around, you know, specifically on how to have a great portfolio. It was more like a tick box exercise. When you apply, you need to have a CV, portfolio, um, and that was about it. There's so many other things that you need to know about when it comes to applying.
And from your perspective, because based on your experience and everything that you've learned at this point, for anyone listening, let's actually provide them when you're applying for a job, especially as a software engineer, what are the real things that you need in order to be successful in your process?
Yeah, so obviously you need a CV, up-to-date CV, and there's lots of things you can do to make that great. But I would say keep it lean. So most relevant experience for the role that you're applying for. So if you're applying for different companies, make it relevant for all of those different companies. So that means you'll have different CVs from different places. Next is if you're applying for programming specifically, or any kind of tech role actually, have a portfolio that demonstrates your skills. So even if you're a junior, still have something like that. So like a GitHub account, any kind of thing that you've worked on in your own time. And employers love to say this. I think people might hear this a lot. Employers do love to actually see people's portfolio, and they do actually look. It just shows that you actually are keen on your craft, like you actually want to learn and try things on your own, and just demonstrates your skill sets a bit. And then some other things to be aware of is have like someone else that can be there for you in terms of, just listening to you and helping you practice for interviews. So I think there's like two kind of things to remember there. If you're new to interviewing, you'll need practice. If you haven't interviewed for a long while, you'll need practice. So if you could find someone, and this could be, so if you're already in a role, this could be a friend or someone you know in the industry who can just be, that you're comfortable with, that can just be there to like help you run through a couple of questions that you think the employer might ask, just so you get into the habit of interviewing again. If you're a junior, then you might not have that connection, but there's communities such like Xuntos and other communities that you could tap into and try and get that kind of help to practice, and they'll give you so many tips and tricks for that.
Yes, and I'll actually put in a plug here. So I've been doing career coaching, and so that's one of the services that I offer, is just doing some interview prep and asking. For me, I always practice like the typical questions that, even if it's just something as simple as tell me about yourself, because that's a question that you think you could just go in and like spitfire and say randomly, but there's actually a method to the madness when it comes to answering questions, especially from a tech company perspective, because they're looking for specific clues to hear you say about yourself. So definitely agree on that. And then also, Andre, I think a little piece that we have talked about, but we didn't explicitly say here, is your network. And that's just like to continuously be networking and building up your contacts, because when you apply for a job, who doesn't want to be referred in by someone who already works there? So it's always good to continue to build your network as well.
I want to add to that, like, if you can get referred, that is your biggest like ally. That's one thing I really learned more so when I got into Kin & Carter. Like, if someone refers you, it's so much more easier, because the way how these systems work when you submit a CV, at least for some of the big tech companies, they're actually using like automated systems to scan your CV for keywords. Whereas if you get a referral, it kind of bypasses that a bit and goes straight to like someone on the team, and they can basically give you feedback, yes or no. Because otherwise you're waiting for your CV to be reviewed by these systems, and because of the volume of people, you may never get a response. So yeah, referrals are awesome.
Yes, referrals are basically like gold when it comes to applying for jobs. And Andre, also just at the beginning of your journey, you mentioned being a little, I'll say, hesitant going into software engineering because you wanted to do UX UI, but you studied software engineering and programming. So what made you want to have that career switch before actually fully getting into the software engineering field?
So honestly, when I was doing the course, I loved it, but I did notice that I worked at a slower pace to my peers. Now, this doesn't mean I didn't get like a good grade um, compared to my peers in the class. It just took me a longer time to get there. And I always was fearful that in the industry, if I work at that pace, I'm gonna struggle, or I'm gonna get fired, or I didn't think that employers would want that. So it gave me doubts about my ability. And to put some background and content into that, in school I was screened for dyslexia. So I knew I had some kind of learning difficulty, or I'm neurodivergent. So I was aware of that, and I didn't hear or see anything around employees supporting people with learning difficulties. So based on my experience at uni and going into the workplace, where I felt it would be a much more stricter, I was fearful of that. So it gave me doubt. So I was trying to push to something what I felt was more comfortable for me to do. That didn't really, it would still push me, but not in the way that programming would, in the sense of, for me at least. So yeah, that's why I had those doubts.
Well, and then you ultimately ended up going to software engineering or programming, and you are having success. And I want to just take some time now to discuss the programming aspect and what you learned / how you can keep your skills up. So let's start with, from a programming perspective, when you were in uni and also just in your career, how did you even know what programming languages to learn? Because there are so many languages at this point.
Yeah, focus, focus, focus. My university specifically taught in your first and second year Java. So I already had a specific focus, and I'm grateful for that. Because as you said, there's so many different programming languages. How do you ever choose? But by having that focus, I was, yeah, I was, I guess, I'm going to say restricted to learning a specific subset of things to build. So whatever I can build with Java, that's what I learned. It didn't stop me from learning other languages, by the way. I learned like JavaScript, Python, all different kind of things, but that was in my own time. And yeah, I'm saying like focus, 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 because it's great to explore these languages, but when it comes professionally, at least, most of the time you will stick to a small subset of languages, at least per project. And that's what you're going to be using for however long your project is for. And just learn that language and learn the paradigms behind it, the fundamentals behind it. Those are the core fundamentals, because when you learn that, you'll be able to translate them into other languages. So then, I'm not there yet, to be honest, but once you reach to a good point there, is you reach a stage, and I've seen this with the leads I work with, so like the senior developers I work with, they can pick up any language. They've never even seen the language before, but yeah, they jump in a project, they pick it up within a couple of days or weeks. And that's because they know their fundamentals like inside out. They can just pick anything, and it translates across all languages for most part. So that's why I'm saying focus on one language or a couple, like 2 or 3, learn the fundamentals, and it will translate to other languages, and you'll be able to pick up whatever you want.
And when you say fundamentals, what does that really look like? And I'm thinking from the perspective of, so similar to you, when I was in undergrad at university, I took some programming classes. I am not a programmer by any means, but I took JavaScript and I think a couple of maybe like another language. But I noticed that when I look at people's code now, which is very rare, that JavaScript or Java's like seems like it's kind of like the basis. Like if you have that base knowledge, then you can kind of figure out what's going on within the code. So want to just fully define what are fundamentals, and then also get your experience of, because you learned Java, do you feel like you at least have like that base knowledge where you could look at code and say, oh, I think I can figure this out a little quicker?
Yeah, so I'll start from your last part. I can figure other code out easier. Like I don't program in Python, like on a day-to-day. But when I have looked at it or tried it myself, for example, I can read through it and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I work backwards from that, so the reason why I can read it and understand it is you begin to realize that the way how programs and code is structured is similar. So that's because of the fundamentals. And these fundamentals are basically how to structure your code and understanding like some of the things around, like variables and architecture, code architecture. So by code architecture, I mean um, there's specific ways in how you would structure your code or programming that have been used for decades. So it's like a common set of ways to program things. So just to throw out a name, people might not know what this means, but like MVP, it's an architecture of how to structure your code. So these kind of things, these kind of fundamentals, can translate across all programming languages.
Interesting. I've actually never heard of that. But again, not a coder, so I probably shouldn't have. But I definitely will look up that architecture because I don't know, I'm just curious. And I feel like in order to stay in tech, you have to stay curious. So definitely learning something new today. And Andre, before we move forward and talk about your overall career and what you've done since being out of uni, do you want to circle back and talk about the organization that you created? So, and I don't want to mispronounce it, so can you say the name of it again?
Yeah, Xuntos.
Xuntos.
Yeah.
So Xuntos, what is it? And then also, I know you talked a little bit about the motivation behind it for why you created it, but let's talk about that a little bit. Mention that again.
Yeah, so Xuntos, to give credit to my co-founder, who is called Ola, by the way, was a name he came across that means together. So Xuntos means together, and that's perfect because that's the community that we're building. So let me explain what Xuntos is first. So Xuntos is a community for those that are underrepresented in the tech field. So by underrepresented, these are people who typically, at least in the workforce, you don't see much of. So this could be, it could be Black people, it could be people with disability, it could be from the LGBTQ plus community. So we support them, and we specifically mostly target early careers and graduates. So how do we do that? We do that through organizing like CV reviews, mock interviews, workshops. So workshops around agile practices. So we're basically telling them what to expect in the tech field. So when we do workshops, we're basically simulating some of those things they were going to be doing from day one. So yeah, like agile. Yeah, and we do lots of workshops, and we basically build in a community where they feel safe to explore, safe to try different things, and basically connect with people. That's one of the biggest things that we can provide to people who join Xuntos is connections. Connections to help them learn, connections to help them find jobs. Yeah, that's what we're building. And all of this came about because, as I shared in my background, for me, I really struggled navigating finding a graduate job. And I had my reasons, as I was mentioning, around my self-doubt, but also just navigating that space of graduate roles, like understanding I didn't know, how these companies' CV systems work, scanning for keywords. I didn't have interview practice, like verbally. I I had like a GitHub portfolio, but there were some things missing. So I was like, why why do people have to suffer? They don't need to suffer like I did. Why not try and change that? So that's why we created Xuntos, out of that frustration. Um, my co-founder was going through the same thing. So yeah, we came together with a common frustration and created Xuntos straight away after we graduated, basically. So we graduated in the summer of 2016, and we created Xuntos in that same summer, and we've been going ever since. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful that you all created that, because I think that's an essence that the tech industry is missing now. Is the whole reason that tech even started was if there was an issue, or something, basically if there was an issue, tech or tech individuals could come along and help create a solution. So you all saw an issue or a gap, and you all created the organization to help bridge that gap. And I think that's so wonderful. So thank you for that. And for people who are listening to this podcast and might be interested in joining the Xuntos community, is that online or only based in the UK? Or both?
Well, our events are, to be honest, are UK-based events because all of the team is in the UK. However, that doesn't mean we don't want to be international. We do. So wherever we can, we do try to have like virtual events. So last year we held like a virtual careers fair online. So we do cater for people outside the UK as well. So yeah, people can reach us on our socials and see our events, whether that's in person in UK or virtually anywhere across the world.
Excellent. I will definitely make sure to share all that information in the show notes for this episode. So everyone make sure to check that out. And Andre, for the last half of our conversation, we have yet to touch on your experience like in the workplace after getting your job post uni. So let's go into that and just talk about some of the lessons that you've learned. So you've been at KNC for quite a while, and what has your experience been like? What have you learned since getting your like first corporate job, I guess we'll call it?
Yeah.
In industry.
Oh, what can I say? There's so much to unpack there. Wow. when I came into this role as a graduate, I had, let's say I had 5% industry knowledge. So that 5% was that one university module I did for about a couple of months, where I tried out Android development. And so when I came into KNC, I was literally going off all the talk. I gave a lot of talk, I say, because when I was interviewing, I had nothing to show apart from my talk and my motivation and a few projects I did at university. So I joined and I was going through training as a graduate. So they rotate me around different departments or different teams, and I learned different trades or different crafts. I think one of the biggest things that hit me is this is not university anymore. So university has so much, and maybe people don't realize this. I certainly didn't really realize this, is that university has so much flexibility. I know we have lectures at certain times, but after that, you're free to do whatever you want. It's not a rigid 9 to 5. In the workplace, it's 9 to 5, and you're employed to do that within those hours. It's not that I can decide to do my work at, I don't know, 2 p.m. and then leave the rest of the day. At uni, like at uni, it doesn't work that way. So that was my biggest shock. And I had to navigate how to do that. And just I had to continue like to have my hunger for learning, because I did have a massive hunger for learning. And yeah, I just did that in my first like year or two at Kin Carter. And Kin Carter was great for me, and it's great for me in terms of learning, because we're a consultancy and we run projects that are in different industries. So within like 2 years I joined, I've worked in like 3 different project teams in 3 different industries. So although yeah, so although I've been at Kin Carter for a while, I like to tell people that I've actually been in like 3 different jobs or 6 different jobs. Because when I'm on the product team, I'm placed or embedded in other companies' tech teams. So I've seen from the inside how companies work for their technology or products, and that's unique. Like if you're working for a product company, maybe like at Google or Facebook or something, you just learn about Facebook or Google kind of stuff. Whereas for me, I was learning about different industries. So I learned about the e-commerce industry. I was learning about barcodes. Like there's a lot to that. There's different type of barcodes and stuff that I just had no clue about. Then I learned about the energy industry, specifically in the UK. And there's so much information there I had no clue about. So I'm like gaining like industry focused knowledge, just from like a high level point of view and then technical point of view. And it's awesome. For me, I will, even to this day, I'm learning everything. I'm learning something new every day. And I'm not joking there. I really am learning something new every day. So what I try to do as well is, I'm still trying to figure this out, is keeping that energy to learn something new outside of work. So when I was in university, I had so many different like small sample projects I was doing, and I was trying to learn about making websites, but also making Android apps. And then I was learning about Python. and then some data stuff. I was trying so many different things. I didn't finish them. um, at, at work now, I don't have as much time. When I finish work, I'm exhausted. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to navigate, with what little time I have outside of work, how can I use it to keep learning? So I just have this is a small, I used to have more bigger projects. I've scaled it down to something much smaller and more specific, that I just do. And I just something that I can pick up easily, like this in 1 hour after work this week, and then another hour after work next week, like something I can keep picking up. Because I found I have this big ambitious project. I try and do it. I do a little bit, and then after a while, I'm exhausted. I just complete out exhausted. I have no more energy. I don't do it for like a month or two, and then I forgot what I'm doing. It's like, just ditch this project now. Can't do it.
I
So,
do. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do appreciate that you mentioned the part about staying curious, because a lot of, well, first off, tech is changing every day. So you can't just get a particular role and not continue to learn, because you'll fall behind like within even a month worth of time if you don't keep up with the latest things that are happening. So really appreciate your comment about being curious, because if we're not curious in these roles, we won't be successful. And then also want to go back and touch on the piece that you mentioned about, because for those who don't know, Ken and Carta is a consulting company. And so every time that you're on a project, you basically say you're learning a new industry, right? As well as a new client. And so want to go back and just ask, what is the process that you take in order to learn the new client and the new industry?
Yeah, most of the time, uh, I wouldn't say, so there's so much to learn. So obviously I'm trying to, when I go in a new project and it's new industry, new client, I'm not on the perception that I need to know everything now, right? I know it's going to take a bit of time, so it's incremental. So I'm finding out what I'm working on, what specific part within the industry is the product that I'll be working on. And then from there, I can break down and work towards, okay, I need to learn about this specific thing and then this specific thing. And I just take that step by step. And the biggest thing that helps me is just at least how my project teams have been, is there's people who are very knowledgeable in the industry that are embedded in my teams. So I'm tapping them up and getting knowledge sharing from them. So any meeting I have with them, I'm learning something new and I'm using that. And then I can use that to then research something else, because they might have said some lingo I have never heard before. They might explain it, but I still don't understand. So I can go away and research it now because it's something new and I probably will need that. So I just take it step by step. I use the knowledge in the team to help me as well. And then I'm going away and learning about that for myself.
And then also, speaking of learning, when you first start, well, still at Ken and Carter, but when you first started at Ken and Carter, you mentioned talking the talk in regards to getting the role, and then you did Android engineering, correct?
Mhm.
So for people who are in a similar situation as you and you have to learn as you go, what tips or advice and even some resources do you have in regards to learning Android engineering, especially when you're on the job?
One of the amazing things that I've learned at this company, and I've seen it at a lot of companies actually, is the concept of a community of practice. So in kindergarten, at least in Europe, we have community of practice. So community of practice is shaped around your craft. So there's one for Android, and every week all the Android developers come together and we knowledge share. So we prepare workshops, presentations, or just have chit chat. And it's through those knowledge sharing sessions is where I learned a lot about learning Android. So it was a community. So there was people who had been doing Android for like years, and they'd be sharing things and I'll be learning from them. And then I would ask them about certain things and they would recommend you should learn this or you should learn that. And then they will also support me. So I've gone away and learned this and tried that. I've showed them and then they give me more advice. So a community is a great way to learn Android or any programming, software, engineering stuff. And there's so many online these days, like for Android specifically, you can go on Android website by Google and they've set up like lots of virtual like learning paths for people. So you can have a combination of just learning through tutorials on a website, or you can actually join virtual like Zoom calls and mingle with people and ask them questions and learn, or join in like Slack channels. So that there's a lot out there now for learning. And specifically for me, I'm quite a visual learner, and I like to listen to things as well. So I go on YouTube for Android stuff, many great channels out there. And I read a specific blog as well that I can share to you, Deena, and can put it in the show notes for people that are interested. It gives a great lowdown on learning Android specifically. It's on different levels, so beginner, medium, advanced. So those are great resources as well.
Yes, I will definitely add that to the show notes. Thank you so much, Andre. And also, just to stay on the same theme of our episode of learning and sharing resources, I want to know, what are some of, let's say, what is your top lesson that you've learned in your role for this year that you can share with listeners?
Oh yeah, good point. I've actually started doing this thing where I'm gathering feedback about myself from my peers. So self-reflection, if I just summarize it, self-reflection. So what I'm doing is I've done a piece of work, and then at the end of the week, I'll ask maybe like my tech lead or my project, my lead, my manager, let's say, and I'll just say, hey, I've done this piece of work. You looked at it, you've seen how I performed. Is there anything that you felt I done really well in, is there anything that I could do better in? And I'm just gathering that feedback week by week. And it's really quite powerful. Like if self-reflection is a powerful tool. It not only helps you like see where you can be better, but also it can help reassure what you're doing really well. Because some people might have doubts, like, is this actually, like the thing I'm doing, is this actually good? Does it actually help? So you can grab some like receipts on this week, I gave this amazing presentation and my whole team liked it. So you're building like a backlog of great things you've done, but also at the same time you're seeing where you can be improving, and you can use that to feed back into, okay, I got this piece of advice that I need to improve on this piece. Okay, how can I do that? I got something to start off with. I'll find a way to be better in there. So that's one thing.
Yes, and self-awareness is key, right? Just being able to have that awareness of how you're doing and also get feedback. But what if you get some really strong feedback that maybe you don't agree with, or it kind of takes you back? How do you receive that feedback and understand, like, hey, I need to make a change? Because as we know, sometimes we get a little bit in our ego and we don't think that we need to change, or, we get upset about it, which being upset is a natural reaction. But how do you move past that?
You will get upset. I won't lie. You definitely will. Um, what can I say? It's like you have to approach it in the sense that this is feedback, but don't try not to come of it in a positive way, I will say. So you're gonna get feedback immediately before you even get it. Think of it as a positive. I mean, it really does wonders. So you think of it as a positive beforehand. You might get hit with a really negative feedback, right? But at least for me, at least my mindset is already positive. So now I got the negative feedback. I don't like it. I disagree with it. I hate it. I hate everyone that wrote it. Like, I'm just furious.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm having that positive mindset. Okay. And I'm reading the feedback and I'm trying to diffuse myself from being angry. So sometimes that means just stepping away from that feedback and come back to it in a day or two. And you might find that your mood has changed. It's like, okay, what can I pick out from this feedback that is actually useful for me? Because I've had feedback in the past that, to be honest, I don't like at all, but there's something in there that is actually a little bit useful for me. I'm
Yeah.
not saying all of it. So you have the power to choose the feedback that is actually useful. But I really encourage, like, do try and find something of use in that negative feedback, and use that as a stepping stone, and then throw away the rest. Because yeah, we will get upset. Ego is a self-ego is real. We all have egos. It's not easy to control. So yeah, just take it with a pinch of salt and remember you can disregard the feedback. But do try and at least learn something from it, because not all feedback is just um to attack you. There is something genuine in there you can learn to be or do something better.
Yes, I definitely agree. Also, want to add on to not internalize feedback, because I think sometimes, especially as people of color, when we get negative feedback, we think, like, we kind of think that's who we are, if that makes sense. And we
Mm.
are definitely not those things. So don't internalize it and like take that on your journey with you. Like you said, some of it, just throw it away. You don't have to keep it in your mind, or, you are not actually that person just based on the feedback that you receive for that one thing. So definitely great advice. And Andre, to wrap up our conversation today, so we've talked through your career through university, actually getting a software engineering or programming role. I do want to ask, for people who are listening to this episode, let's say they are taking classes and doing all of these side projects to get into software engineering, what tips or advice do you have for them to get into the tech industry?
Definitely try and join like a community um that you can relate to. So for me, if I had something like Xuntos, I would have joined. Just like-minded people, who can relate to are in the industry. So I could learn from them. I guess any kind of arts that you may be thinking of or haven't thought about yet. So they can give you career advice, CV tips, interview prep, etc. So that's the biggest thing I always recommend. Like find a community, whether it's through Twitter or wherever I find that community. That's the biggest thing I would recommend if you want to get into tech.
And then you also mentioned before, focus on a particular programming language. So for anyone who's looking for tips there, what programming language do you recommend learning first? Or like, let's say your top 3 programming languages that someone should learn right now.
It would depend on like where maybe people want to go in the industry, but generally one of the nicer programming languages for beginners is something like Python. Is quite nice. It translates pretty well into something that is more like readable for most people, and is also very powerful. So I would recommend Python, and then Java as well. It's a language that's been around for a very long time, and it's also used in practically every industry. So it's something you can start off with, and you might end up using it in your day job as a professional. So it's not something that you just learn and then throw away. So I would recommend those 2 languages.
And then Andre, so again, you provided a lot of great information, but I want to open the floor. Anything that we didn't discuss or any tips or advice that you have for people who are listening to this episode, now's your time to share.
Oh, I did have something I forgot. Just generally, like anyone that wants to get into the industry, whether you're an early career, so someone finishing university or college, or someone who's transitioning. So maybe you've done worked in a different field, like a lawyer, and then you want to get into tech. Yeah, just there's a lot of things out there nowadays where you can join like boot camps, or join like online courses. These are really great ways to learn and have that community. But also, yeah, as I said just now, like try to find a other community where you can go to meetups and get more advice on that. Other than that, not sure what else to share there.
No, that's great. And I think that is an excellent note to end on. Andre, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. And yeah, I think everyone who's listening to this podcast is going to get some great insights in regards to not only what it's like for your experience, but also how to get into software engineering.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun.
Good. All right. Thanks, Andre. You have a great rest of the day, and I will let you know when the episode is going to be released.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I can make my world come true. All my dreams will see me through. And if that will get me down, my dreams will turn things all around. With a smile upon my face, I can see a better place. Doesn't matter what I can make